Hello, everyone. This is Carly Rosenfeld with the Benefits team. I'm here with Wynn Meyer, who's going to be presenting work-life integration for the month of May. I'm going to give you a quick introduction, and we're also going to be recording this. So if you have to step out, or if you missed something, we will be recording this and be posting it at rewards@3ds.com, which is our intranet. So again, it will be recorded and posted at our rewards website. And with that, I'll introduce Wynn, and she'll tell you a little bit about herself, and then we'll get started.
Hello, folks. My name is Wynn Meyer. I'm a work-life consultant with KGA. So a lot of what I do is go into companies and do wellness seminars like this and consult with companies around workplace issues. So we're talking today about work-life integration, and this is something that I'm sure every one of you that are listening here today have struggled with. And I like to start with a little bit of a disclaimer. There's what I call maybe a warning. This training does not contain concrete solutions to all your problems and a quick answer. Like most things, this is an abstract concept that will look differently from person to person. With so many of us torn between juggling heavy workloads, managing relationships, and family responsibilities, squeezing in outside interest, it's no surprise that more than 1 in 4 Americans describe themselves as super stressed, and that's not balanced nor healthy. One wrong move and the whole thing could come tumbling down on us. Today, more than ever, individuals are required to fulfill multiple roles in their personal and professional lives in the constraints of a 24-hour workday. Session goals. We're going to look at what work-life integration is and isn't. We're going to look at examining our multiple roles in life, observing how values set your priorities, explore how technology can be useful, and evaluate ways to overcome obstacles that get in the way. So let's begin with a poll. What are the struggles you have? And this question here will be coming up in a moment. And the question is what is your #1 reason that work-life integration is so hard? A, lack of time. B, competing demands. C, technology allowing constant access. D, poor planning and organization. Now, I might not have put on the specific answer that you might be thinking of, but if you can name it, it'll give us some clarity about where people stand. Are we coming?
So it looks like competing demands are popular, lack of time.
All right. So, right. Looks like about 53%, about half of us, competing demands are the most problematic. Lack of time, and a little bit about poor planning. People are being honest with themselves about how they plan their time. So in truth, it's accurate, right, that there's so many demands on us in our work and our personal lives that pull us in all different directions. Not long ago, there was this triangular theory of balance. And this theory maintains that the interaction between personal needs, others' needs, and work responsibility creates this ever-changing situation that can either cause balance or imbalance in the family. CEO of Care.com, Sheila Marcello, describes both work and home require our best selves. The idea of work-life balance suggests we should check our family lives at the door when we arrive at the office and leave our work behind when we head home. That work and family are 2 separate ledgers in a zero-sum competition with each other. But we know from experience that's not the way the world works. The new norm now is integration. It's no longer about creating a separate divide between work and family life. That is mostly unrealistic with the advent of technology, mobile phone and wireless internet with access to work email anywhere you are. Gone are the days when you could come home from the office and unplug. We're now living in a 24/7, always connected business environment. Your company doesn't stop running when you leave the office or when you go on vacation. Technology enables one to be accessible anytime or any place. So integration becomes this dynamic concept that's always shifting. There's no right way to do it. Your version of work-life integration will look different from your coworkers. Currently, 30 million Americans work from home at least 1 day a week, which can blur the lines, as one might imagine. Americans are working 1 month per year more than in 1965. So what that suggests is that the work, personal, and others' needs are all blurred together. So integration is how we have to kind of think about our balance.
Lynn, I'm actually just going to stop you for a sec just to
Sure.
make sure that people know that the question box is available for people who have questions. I didn't mention that at the beginning, but if you have any questions for Wynn to answer at the end, feel free to use the question box and put them in there and we can address that at the end. So.
Great. So this slide looks at possible generation differences. As you can see in the chart, it goes from traditionalist, born in the late 1920s, all the way up to the millennials. This chart does not address the newer generation Z, as they have been coined, that consists of those born in 1995 or later. And this, that we're still collecting data on this. So, some people like to think about generation and the generation gap and how it exists in the workplace and how they view work-life values. There's definitely some people that think that generation gaps don't really exist and that in general, all employees want to be able to do the basic things, trust their supervisors, don't really like a lot of change, we all like feedback, and in fact, that the number of hours you put in at work depends more on the level in the organization than your age. So this is just something to keep in mind as you think about your coworkers, how you view work, and your work-life values. What roles do you play in life? Everyone plays many roles in their life. A life role is an activity to which we regularly devote a significant amount of time and energy to. So these are the different parts you play in your day where there are certain expectations that guide your behaviors. So if you think about a role that you play here at work, you might be a supervisor, you also might be a friend to a colleague, you might be a coach to your kids' soccer team. There's a wide variety of roles. And what happens is we generally have about 8 salient roles in general. So if you were to kind of do a quick list, you'll probably come up with on average about 8. Sometimes people jostle between them several times throughout their day, right? So you get a call from your kid's school and you have to jostle between your work role and then flip into a mom or dad role. So sometimes life gets complicated in that way when we feel we aren't spending adequate time or energy on one of those roles. So an exercise that I encourage you to do is not only identify how many roles you have, but it's to create a pie chart. And I know it sounds silly because we always have extra work, but create a pie chart for how much time you spend on each role in a week. And in a week in which you are awake, not the sleeping hours. You might find you're spending too much waking time on something maybe that is no longer fulfilling, replenishing. For instance, maybe you're doing some extra volunteering or always saying yes to things that you no longer enjoy. And in that way, maybe that you can have some more time for things that are important. Values matter. Ask yourself what is really important and then have the courage to build your life around your answer. Harvard Business Review published a study that determined when people focus more of their attention on the things that matter, they are more efficient, engaged, and productive. So in this way, balance is not achieved simply by allotting time to various and numerous activities. Balance or integration is achieved by allotting appropriate time and quality to activities that are important to you. So we often get so caught up in the rat race that we forget what is really meaningful. It's important to take a step back and remind yourself what you value most, because that will guide and predict your behavior. So with that being said, on this next slide is a grid of a bunch of different values that most people might identify with. To feel successful, you need to live according to your values. So ask yourself, what are my values in terms of the type of spouse, parent, and employee I want to be? What choices will I be happy that I made 5 years from now? So you might look at this list and maybe go ahead, circle or write down the top 3, and you may even add your own in the empty space. And how does your list of values match up with your daily routine and schedule? Because oftentimes there's not alignment, right? So you have a value perhaps of personal development, but then you're not seeking any outside learning opportunities to accomplish that goal. Breaking it down, what are some of your work values? So here's a poll question. And it's an interesting thought, right? Because I talked a little bit about personal, but what about your work values? Reflecting on what work means to you. So besides financial necessity, which we all need to live, taking away that, what's the number one reason why you work?
A is a big one.
Ah.
Tied between C and D.
Okay, let's see if I can see the numbers. No worries. All right, so it looks like we have about, oh, it's still polling. Hold on a moment. People are maybe changing their mind or adding. Okay, I would say on average it looks about 40% are picking self-esteem and sense of identity and purpose. The other high numbers are personal achievement and contribution to community and our world, followed by a little bit of intellectual development. Not much on the way of teamwork and camaraderie. So it's really important to reflect on what work means to you, and here's why. We get so frustrated with work sometimes, and it's easy to think how much time we spend at work, and maybe we feel guilty about time away from family. Well, doing this poll and kind of reflecting why work is important can help you understand that the work you do has a purpose also, right? It's not just for a paycheck, which we often think, that actually there's some other moral and purpose that we have as we think about how it benefits ourselves. So a bulk of you are able to say that self-esteem and identity and purpose is a real strong value as to why you work. And that is important because that spills over into how you are in your personal life as well. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. It's good. Next one. So this is a wheel of life exercise, and I put it out there because it's been done before, but I think it's a really helpful tool. So this is 8 spokes of a wheel, 0 being the center and 10 being the tip. And you can see all these different areas. How satisfied are you in your life in these areas? And you can put a dot on each of those areas. So, perhaps on health, you might be an 8, and then on career, you might be a 4, family, a 6, whatever. So 10 is the most satisfied, 0 is the least satisfied. And what you do is after you put in those dots, then you connect the dots to form a wheel. And the question is how bumpy would the ride be? And chances are there are areas within this that maybe you haven't been paying attention to, maybe that aren't actually important. For instance, some people might not think, spiritual life is important, so that could be a 0. Maybe there's something else. Maybe it's civic obligation or something like that. But the point being is that if often as we go on in our life, we forget some of these areas, and it can be helpful to kind of reflect back. The other thing that can be useful here is actually doing this with somebody you care about. So if you have a spouse or loved one, somebody you're in a relationship with, checking in. Where are you at in these areas? Are there areas that you can work at? Are there gaps in between where you are now and where you'd like to be, right? What your ideal level of attention on one of these areas. So it's something that you could just quickly do on a scrap piece of paper. So I'd encourage you to check it out if you're interested. Defining success for yourself. So as I've mentioned, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Defining what success looks like varies from person to person. For instance, family culture. Every family has a different flavor in terms of what matters to them. So ask yourself, what kind of family culture do I want to create? Do I value eating meals together, going to kids' activities, or spending quality time with my spouse? What decisions would be aligned with that culture? For some, it might be being home 4 nights a week for dinner. For others, it might be understanding what's going on in the lives of their family members. It's going to vary. individual preferences. To some children, having you show up at certain events may be a big deal, whereas to others, it's not. Ask them when it's most important to them that you show up. The same is true with your spouse or loved one. Find out what they need to feel supported and connected with you. The key question is, what matters most to the people in my family? And again, we kind of go on with our lives, but we don't actually have these conversations to decide, okay, where do I want to be, and what is going to be helpful for my family or my personal life, and what would that look like? And it could be very different than you might anticipate. You might be spending a lot of time volunteering or coaching or being a Cub Scout leader and stuff, but actually maybe that's not as of value to your children. So kind of having that open dialogue can be useful. Job constraints. Certain positions require more travel or more work outside of normal business hours. So ask yourself, what's truly required? Where do I have flexibility? You know, no matter how well you plan, times will come up where work and family commitments come head to head. These situations rarely feel easy, but with some reflection, you can reduce the guilt around your decisions and decrease stress by finding ways to make your presence and support felt in both worlds, even when you literally can't be in two places at once. Focus on efficiency. So when are you most productive? An integrated view behooves you to decide when to dive deeply into work or when you are better off taking a break. This is a less rigid approach and allows you to have freedom to choose what suits you best. For some of us, we might be morning people and we're get up and go. So those are the times when you want to dedicate to a specific project or deadline that is most intense and maybe even the hardest. If you get tired towards the afternoon, then those are the times that maybe you check your email and do something a little bit more light, responding to things that don't require your full attention. So being mindful of how your clock runs. We all are different people in that way. Lead from your strengths. So this is insight from positive psychology. Dr. Martin Seligman from University of Pennsylvania talks about it's not who shows up, but how you show up that matters. He says that we build inner capacity, resilience, and an increased sense of purpose when we lead from our strengths. For instance, if you are an organizer and planner type, it would make sense that you would be in charge of a social or family calendar. And maybe you even consolidate them or figure out some technology use so everyone is on the same page. On the other hand, if you have a strength of creativity, you can use that skill to be fully present in family activities while bringing innovative ideas to the table at an important meeting. So you can use your strengths to navigate personal and professional challenges. Seek the sweet spot. So this is the ideal, right? The ideal is that we bring our strengths, we bring our sense of purpose and our passion, and they blend together to find that sweet spot in the middle. Tal Ben-Shahar, another leader in positive psychology, talks about whether we are at the kitchen table or at a meeting at the office, we learn what to say yes to and what to say no to make effective choices, which ultimately reduces our time constraints and stress on things that don't matter. So what can you say no to, which is the hardest part, right, in your life to allow for more room and time for the things that do matter? Accept the paradox. So this is a challenge, right? We have to let go of imperfection while still trying hard, and it enables us to forgive ourselves for not getting it right? So you can still make the effort, it's not going to look perfect, and accept this, and that brings about peace. Of course, there's going to be times when you will feel more confident in one area and less in another, right? So if you're having a big challenge at home, then maybe work might be on the back burner, and that's natural that it's going to ebb and flow. On the other hand, if you're feeling like you're excelling in work and you're kind of not being able to cut the mustard at home and having difficult relationships, that's going to change how you show up. So realize that it's not going to be a perfect fit, but you can certainly make the effort, and that's the ultimate goal with this, because there's not a perfect fit for everybody, nor a perfect ideal solution, but what's going to work. Building support network. Who's on your team? A Harvard Business Study in 2014 looked at senior executives, and they talked about how the most important thing for them was the behind-the-scenes folks that are supporters are critical to their success. So this can look like a wide variety of individuals. They can be people, friends, family members, caretakers who can help you at home with kids or basic household duties, caregiver support. So if you're helping out an elderly parent or relative, support at work, trusted colleagues, and what I like to call a self-care team. So everybody, it's a helpful thing to have something on the outside that gives you a little bit of sense of self-renewal. So whether it looks like a massage or taking a class or getting your hair done or whatever it is, who are the people that can help take care of you? This is helpful in your integration and your balance efforts. And the key thing here is no one person should have to bear all responsibilities. Rotate, let family members choose tasks to be able to help out. Often as competent, educated folks, it's hard to ask for help. It's hard to admit that you have your hands full. But in a sense, we're all in it together. So it does help to realize that there are other people that can help you work at this. Because we're all struggling with the same work-life integration challenge in a sense. So thinking about it as your support network going forward.
How beneficial do you think it would be to put, who's on your team on that wheel?
Yeah.
For people who are wondering, how do I set this up? Maybe on a piece of paper with the wheel.
Yeah.
They can kind of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's it. So on that wheel, I mean, you'll see like one of the spokes is a financial, right? And so who is your support person around financial? You might have a financial advisor, you might have somebody at the bank. And then in terms of family and stuff, I mean, who is your support person in that arena? Because I think what happens is that we go at life alone, but when we really step back and think about it, we are a part of humankind and we are a part of a whole picture. And so there are people out there, but sometimes we might need to tap into that a little bit more. We forget.
Yeah. Okay. Curious.
Yeah, good idea. Go ahead. Yep. So moving forward, we're going to talk about managing technology. And this is something that I think is an important topic. So it might not be the number of emails, but how often you check them that causes the stress. So we have a poll question coming up. And the poll question is, how do you manage the technology for yourself and family? A, shutting off alerts when not at work. B, checking email certain times of day. C, turning phone off when need to be focused and present on whatever activities, work or home. D, setting boundaries for yourself and others about phone use. So we'll see what comes in.
You had an instant spike on setting boundaries for yourself and others. And then email on the other.
Yeah. Okay, so right, it looks like, Carly is right, it looks like about 40% setting boundaries for yourself and others. Looks like about an even split between checking email certain times of day and turning phone off when need to be focused and present. So, right, I mean, studies have shown that when we multitask and when we have too many distractions with email and checking it multiple times, then it's hard to kind of stay focused on the present task. So they do say that if it is possible to set certain times a day to actually check it, whether it be right in the morning or at lunchtime or in the evening, but the constant dinging of our phone to remind us that there's an incoming email can be very distracting. And then the setting boundaries for yourself and others. When I've done these live seminars, a lot of people come up with a lot of different things for this. And some of the best I've heard is they decide to turn off cell phones and all technology during dinner time, for example. That's one of the common ones. Or setting limits around with their kids when they are, at a practice and stuff, that the parent is not on their phone, they're actually watching or present. And, a lot of people set boundaries around themselves. So maybe if they're having, a conversation with their spouse or loved one, then they shut off the phone. So what does that look like? And again, that's defining that success, because oftentimes now with technology, we really have to think about this topic, because we can't let the technology manage us, right? Because it is so ubiquitous, and we need to think about what we can do to kind of manage it, because it does become this monster that we have to wrestle with. So thinking about what that looks like can be useful.
An employee had said, you know what, I don't set boundaries, and how do you, just me working off of that, I just wondered, if you don't set boundaries,
Right.
Well, what's maybe the first step to setting a boundary, I guess is my question.
Yeah, so setting a boundary is determining, and maybe it's a question, how could I answer this the best? So maybe it's determining when you feel like you are the most distracted.
Yeah.
And so maybe if it's at a meeting, or if it's with your family life, determining, okay, when can I put this on silent, right? Because it doesn't mean you have to turn your phone off. You could put a phone on silent and put it maybe in another room, and then be present with your family or whatever you're doing. And I think it's determining what area of your life is getting, the best word that I can think of is muddled, right? That you don't feel as focused and present on, and then setting a goal around that. And, for some it might be, at the end of the day, on the way home, maybe they just need to turn the phone off so they can have that transition period from work to home, so they can just settle down. So it depends. It's an individual boundary setting, but I think looking at what arena is the most problematic and then setting the goal from there.
Okay.
Yeah. So with that being said, there are some useful apps. So I'm not to say that technology is terrible. It actually is very useful and can be helpful. So a couple apps that I think I've tried out, tested, tried and true, and do have some research behind them. Trello. This is an app that is kind of like a project manager app. So it allows you to coordinate and organize your life. You can see projects that you're doing. Say you're doing a house renovation. You can kind of put all your to-do list and pictures and everything around that, or a staff meeting or an agenda item for work or something like that. So that can be helpful. Crunch time is another kind of interesting one. So you can set goals around work-life balance, and then they kind of reward you and remind you to kind of go towards that. A daily routine app, if you're one that wants to set a daily goal of, whether it be exercising or taking breaks or something like that, or doing a mindfulness break or something, they'll send you a message and remind you. So that can be helpful if you're one to kind of get distracted and you need some structure. Headspace is a proven research one. Carly's nodding her head. So this is a mindfulness app that gives you a 10-minute meditation. So it's a really great app for beginners that are new to mindfulness, and it has some animation, and it's user-friendly for folks. So just a helpful hints on technology.
Our employees actually, just as a backup of why I'm shaking my head, and for those who are part of our wellness program, it is part of our wellness program within Vitality. There's a Headspace, and you basically get points for doing it. So that's why I'm shaking my head.
I love it.
And it's right there, then and there for them.
Perfect. Promoting the same thing. That's good. So with work-life integration, planning is really priority. It's important to plan your work life and your home life. So it can be tempting to be kind of laissez-faire about organizing your personal life, but it's really important to envision how you would like things to be before you can plan how you might achieve that success. So I like the idea of a self-renewal activity right after work, especially after a stressful day. So planning something in that transition period from when you leave your work role and enter your life role, right? And it can be anything from listening to music. Sometimes people like to listen to a podcast that's unrelated to kind of work, make appointments, set up a meeting with a friend, something that kind of can revitalize you and replenish you before you head into the life arena, if you will. Plan something time sensitive right after work. This is for folks that have trouble kind of stopping work and want to, extend it way on into the evening hours. So, meet someone for drink, have a class that you want to attend right after work or close to the hour that you want to wrap up. Set a 2-hour wrap-up alarm. So if you have a huge project or deadline, kind of have an alarm, use your technology, use the alarm wrap-up, so that way you know that, okay, this is the time that I can't dive in further, I need to kind of close up shop. Prepare for resistance. So a lot of times when you are setting goals and thinking about work-life integration, people's goals might not match up with yours. Remind yourself of those values that we talked about, work values, which are highly important, as well as your own personal values. And you might need to vocalize, speak up about those and how they relate to somebody else's, and have that open dialogue. Find a role model. It could be someone you know, past or present, who has integrated work life effectively. Most of us can think of somebody or how they made it work. What strategies did they use, and what can you learn from what they did? Back to basics. So self-care is ultimately the foundation for making any of this work. If we neglect our own needs or continually put them aside for family or work obligations, our lives will suffer, leading us less able to take care of families and jobs. So, of course, at the top, is breathe, walk, move, exercise, eat, drink, sleep, repeat, right? That's all stuff that your doctor might tell you. But some of the others that can be really helpful to kind of shake things up is to do something unexpected. So say you have an hour or some time, what can you do that can shake things up? Maybe instead of planning a meeting sitting down, maybe you pick up that person, you go for a walk around the campus, right? So changing it up so that way you can integrate your own goals and still feel fulfilled. Enlist a balance team. So who, again, on that team is going to support you? Disregard what's unimportant. So this seems silly. A lot of people think like, well, how do I know what's unimportant? Well, I like to think about it as on a scale. So if you think about a 1 to 10 scale, maybe on a continuum, 1 to 4 are things that probably don't matter that much. And if you think about, well, how would I know that they don't matter? Well, ask yourself, will it matter in a day? Will it matter in a week? And if it won't matter in a day or a week, probably not that important, right? If it is very important, then it's going to matter in a year's time. It's going to matter in 5 years' time. And that's where you should spend your energy worrying and being concerned and planning and thinking, right? But disregard those things lower on the continuum, from the 1 to 4 scale. Let it go, because it takes a toll on our bodies and our minds to kind of hold on to things that aren't in line with our values and what is important. Humor helps. Laughter really is the best medicine. I'll give you a moment to take a look at this cartoon. So we'll just consider the physiological effects of a good laugh. After a slight rise in your heart rate and blood pressure, there's an immediate recoil. Your muscles relax, your blood pressure drops below pre-laugh levels, and the brain releases endorphins. And these are the same stress-reducing chemicals that are triggered in exercise, right? More oxygen is pumped into your blood and thus your brain. So all this can help your body cope with difficult situations that typically stress the heart, not to mention the soul. So, when you think about humor, try to find light in things that seem heavy. So, for instance, you might recall that disaster vacation that rained and everyone got sick, or the project that was going to make you look so good, and the harder you worked, the worse it got, right? So if you're able to kind of find lightness, find humor, you're going to be better able to cope with the challenges and the curveballs that life throws at us. So utilizing that can be really helpful. And finally, I like to kind of leave it with something that you can reflect on. So what is one thing out of what we've talked about that you can do for yourself? What in this whole presentation in terms of work-life integration that you could try? Now, it might be that you want to do the wheel of life exercise. It might be that you want to start setting boundaries and having a conversation with your spouse or loved one. So identify what that one thing is, write it down, and then share it with somebody. And go ahead and take that action step. Because this is just, 45 minutes, 1 hour seminar. Where are you going to take this going forward? And that's how we'll end it here. So I want to thank you and open for questions.
Sure. So it looks like, question around what do you do when the realities of your job do not align with your most efficient times? And obviously I can just give you a little background in the sense of, we obviously have, and for this question of not necessarily efficient times, we also are a company where, our headquarters is in France.
Okay.
So there's different times that they're working versus us and other countries that our employees deal with. So that's a little added on to this employee's question. But, what do you do when it doesn't align with the efficient time?
So I think it's kind of understanding what your own abilities are, right? So having a sense of when you are at your best, and maybe they don't align in terms of time frame. So if you have a call, say, because of time differences, at an early or the middle of the night, for example, then how can you structure the rest of your day so that way you can be most efficient for that call, but maybe schedule other things so that way it's not as heavy, if you will, if at all possible. Because it's not going to be perfect when you are dealing with different time zones. I mean, that's by nature a very challenging role. So if there's a way to kind of flex around it, and then understanding that that in and of itself is a challenge, recognizing and accepting that it's not going to look just so. And I think it does play to the conversation of having the dialogue with your spouse or loved one, or maybe even a boss or coworker about what could work better. So, maybe it's the times that they're scheduled. Could it be reviewed about when they happen, perhaps not on the weekends? Thinking about what ways might be helpful. And in terms of talking to your spouse, like what would they like to see in terms of your involvement in their lives? So, I mean, I think it's a conversation. It's hard to say specifically, not knowing that specific person and how to kind of coach them with that. But I would look at different angles about how you can match that.
And I think that this question works off of that in the sense of, I think this is a good question in the sense of many people probably have this question, but not how to word it. How do you handle when the expectations of others override your own preferences? So it's a very accurate one, I would say. I question myself. And,
Yeah. So, this is a challenge, right? This is what we talked about right at the beginning, the competing demands. Your own expectations of what you want and somebody else's are going to be quite different. I think the first step is to be aware of that, which it sounds like this person already is. The next step is to determine whether you can have that transparent and honest conversation with the other parties. And in that way, sharing honestly about what your hopes and your expectations are, and recognizing differences, because ultimately we do have to sit at the same table. And you can constantly beat around the bush, but the truth is that you have to name and vocalize what is important and what you would like that to look like. And they might have different ideas, but how can you agree? Maybe there's somewhere to meet in the middle, and kind of clarifying what that might be. I mean, sometimes you might have to bring in an outsider, so if it is like a coworker, you might chat with somebody and say, okay, I have these expectations. My boss or my loved one has these expectations. Where do you see some similarities? Where are there some commonalities? So somebody on the outside might be able to give that reflection a little more. Good. Yeah.
I just do want to open it up again for those who do have questions. Please feel free to put them into the question box. And this is more so I know this answer because it's internally, but where in Vitality do I find the meditation app and what was it called? So within Vitality specifically, it's called the Healthy Mind Program, and Headspace is linked to it. So the Headspace mentioned here. So when you go into Vitality, it's under the points planner, and you should be able to find it there. Yeah, so if anybody has any further questions, it looks like those were good questions that were asked. Again, this is being recorded, so we'll post it at rewards@3ds.com if you had to come in towards the end.
I just wanted to also add that KGA is a work-life benefit, and this is where I'm coming from, but there are licensed professional counselors that are on the phone. So if you do have a work-life integration concern, you can just speak to them over the phone or have an in-person session if needed. So if there are specific areas that you want to talk about, that is a resource for you.
And same with Canada. I actually included this on here as well. Canada has Chappelle, which is their own EAP program, because I think we do have some people from Canada on the phone. You have the same exact type of employee assistance program, just for Canada-specific employees. So you can access this as well. So you should be able to access that. And as for that, I think we'll wrap up for the day. We appreciate Wynn being here, and obviously appreciate you participating. So thank you very much.
Thank you.